Hey everyone, we are back in business today with a new video, which will be the last and final installment of the Training in Portugal series, along with some strength updates. I intended to get this video out last week, but some things have delayed me, most notably some other stuff that I've been up to, such as this. Along with the fact that I actually wanted to have a quick break from structured training. For the final week in Portugal, I decided to have a few really high volume sessions that I hope could act as a bit of a plateau buster for the two main strength moves that I'm pursuing this year, the handstand push-up and the front lever. Typically, I would be working these at either a low volume and a hard variation, or it would be a much easier variation and a much higher volume. Instead, I thought I would combine both of these and I'll be working the hardest variation possible for me along with the highest volume that was realistic. Now, I know this does sound like quite an unusual approach, but I really enjoy some trial and error experimentation and I think it can be really beneficial, especially if it's in the very short term.
As far as I know, I haven't seen them before. I've actually seen them in northern Italy.
So having spent 3 months pursuing the same exercises, I thought it was about time that I had a little bit of a break so I could reset my focus and remind myself of the longer term goals that I have this year. For this reason, I've had an entire week of unstructured training, which has been really beneficial because it's allowed me to enjoy my practice time and put a bit of effort into some other disciplines such as weightlifting. I also capped the week with a great visit to CrossFit CM2 in Chelmsford to catch up with James and Rob, who is the owner of this gym. As we haven't been able to get together for a few months, and the back end of last year, it was a monthly event, and this was timed perfectly as it has really helped to re-energize me for the weeks ahead. So I've put some time today into my new training plan, which looks a little bit like this. So the main goal for this ascending and descending pyramid structure is a gain in strength, which will be achieved generally through the sets in the middle, so somewhere between 3 and 7, where I'm going to be working with a higher intensity, which means either a greater range of motion or a harder variation of the exercise, and naturally this will mean I can only work at the lower rep range, somewhere between 1 and 3. And there's also the secondary hypertrophy benefits, which will be achieved through the volume. So in the case of the handstand push-up, this means I'm going to start the first few sets by working with a range that is pretty comfortable for me. So here I'm using the yoga block on its side. Now I try to ensure that I actually feel pretty strong with the range that I'm working and I can achieve the desired rep range for at least a couple of sets, sometimes 3 depending on how I get on, before I move on to the next level. So to make it slightly harder, I'm going to flip the yoga block on its side again the other way, so the range of motion is slightly greater and therefore the rep range is likely to decrease slightly. I'll keep working at this level, and I might even throw in a bit of a freestanding handstand towards the end of the reps until I feel comfortable to get rid of the yoga block entirely, and then work the full range head to floor. Now in this example, it felt as if I wasn't going to be able to achieve a number of sets using this range. So as soon as I'd done the first one, I then made it slightly easier and decided that the working range for the strength sets was going to be the yoga block in the flat position. As these reps felt pretty comfortable in the previous sets, I decided to throw in a little bit of freestanding practice and try and avoid using the wall for too much assistance. Now once I'd worked through a number of sets of these and I felt as if I probably wasn't going to get any further within this session, I decided to scrap the freestanding attempts, go back to using the wall for a small amount of assistance and just work straightforward strength sets, keeping the form as good as it can be. I generally find a good marker of how well you have structured your session is whether you feel stronger or weaker towards the end. With these sets, I actually felt stronger performing these reps than I did at the same range of motion earlier in the session, so that's a good sign for me. I then finish up by flipping the yoga block back to the highest position, so this is the easiest variation with the smallest range of motion, and make sure that I perform some good reps here for a couple of sets. So once again, it's the same approach with the front lever work. To start with, I'm performing the concentric pulls using a variation which is pretty comfortable for me, which means a bit of a closed tuck. I'm not opening the hip angle completely, but I'm making sure that the eccentric is also pretty controlled. If I can perform a few reps like this for a couple of sets, then I'll move on and make it slightly harder by opening the hip angle for the concentric portion of the movement, and then I might perform a slightly slower eccentric with the same slightly more open hip angle. If those sets feel pretty good, I'll make it slightly harder again, this time with a tuck for the concentric, and then I'll open the hip angle completely to the half lay position, and then I'll try and perform a full eccentric in this position. If possible, I try and stick it at the parallel position, but you can see that's not yet achievable for me. I'll continue working a few sets this way until I feel as if I'm slightly fatigued and I'm probably not going to get any further again, and then I will make the exercise slightly easier by performing the concentric pull with a nice closed hip position, and then I'll perform some static holds at parallel with the best hip position that I can. I'm going to be pursuing this training twice a week for a total of a 6-week phase with my typical deloading approach of every third session, just to make sure that I'm not going to become excessively fatigued. If you're someone who's working towards similar skills, then I would love to hear from you either here or on Instagram. So do get in touch if that's you. Enjoy your week wherever you are, and as always, happy training.